Managers of Training and Development for First Service Residential. Tonight I'm going to be guiding you guys through our Avid Exchange program. And due to just so many people being on the line, what I'm going to do is have all of your phone lines muted. However, we're able to communicate via the chat feature that is on the webinar screen. So it should be on your webinar. Little thing on the right-hand side of your screen. You can type in any questions there. And then during our question and answer portion, after I go over a few sections of the site, I'll be sure to look at those questions and answer them for you. So yes, please feel free to correspond there. And we also have Mary Beth Scott on the line as well, and she's going to be communicating with me and the rest of you too through that chat box as well. So we'll get going through Avid Exchange. And hopefully everybody has a copy of the Avid Exchange Board of Directors user guide, because everything that I'm going to be going through tonight is covered in there. So just so you guys know, you do have that as a reference, and that if you did not receive your username and password yet for Avid, you will be receiving it soon via email. So just a heads up on that. All right, so as we get into Avid Exchange, so what is it exactly? So Avid Exchange is our paperless, web-based application for reviewing invoices, for managers to code them, and for the managers to approve them, and for you to approve them as well. And what this is doing, it's actually replacing your physical signature on the checks. So you guys are going to not have to sign checks anymore. Your approval is the electronic signature. So just because, so that's one of the big changes. It's going to be a lot easier for you to be able to process invoices quickly. You can access them at any time. Let's see here. And one of the main important things for you guys to remember for Avid Exchange is that you have to use Internet Explorer as your web browser. And I know that can be a difficult thing for some of you because maybe you use Mac primarily. We do have a question you have if you use Safari or Google Chrome. And the reason that Internet Explorer is the primary web browser is because the site is fully compatible with Internet Explorer for now. Later this year, Google Chrome is going to be made compatible fully to work with Avid, but for right now, if you use a different web browser, there's certain features of the site that you won't be able to view, that won't function correctly. So for right now, just please make sure that you do use Internet Explorer. If you do have Internet Explorer 10 or 11, just make sure that you're still using those, not any other web browser. So when you do come into Avid Exchange, the web address is in your user guide, but you'll just come to login.avidexchange.net. You'll enter in your username and password here, and this is what the login page looks like. Now I'm just going to take us in here, and then while this is loading, I also wanted to explain too how the actual process works of this whole electronic, paperless invoice process. So what happens with our invoices is that now all of the vendors are submitting their invoices directly to an email address. It's for an Avid team to take that email and look at that invoice image. They're reviewing all of the details on it. So the invoice balance, who the vendor is, what the community, which community the invoice is for, the invoice date, all the specifics of the work order. So all those details are something that the Avid team views. They upload the invoice image into Avid Exchange, so you'll be able to view the exact invoice image itself, along with all the invoice details. So at that point, it's then routed to the manager's queue. The manager will then review the invoice itself. So they'll look at the invoice image and verify that all the information the Avid team put in is correct. So they'll double check the balance, make sure it was sent to them for the right community. What they'll also be doing is coding the invoice. So you won't have to GL code the invoice. All the general ledger coding is going to be completed by your manager. So they're verifying all the information, ensuring that invoice should be paid. Then they'll code the invoice. They click approve, and then the invoice will route to you. as the board member. And so your part of the process, you're going to be either approving the invoice, if you feel comfortable approving it, if you're agreeing to it, that's going to be your electronic signature. And if you don't want to approve it, I'm going to show you a process how you just route the invoice back to the manager. So you don't have to approve anything if you don't feel comfortable, but you'll be able to route it back to the manager with notes as to why you didn't want to get it approved. And then if the manager can fix something on the invoice or resolve the issue or question that you have, they'll be able to fix that, adjust it, and then send it back to your queue for final approval. And then the process will be complete from there, and the check or the payment for the vendor, that will be generated after the invoice is finally approved. So that's just kind of the basic process. So that's the overview of what we're looking at now. So this is what the Avid system looks like. So when you do log in, this is going to be the home screen. So you're going to see all of this, and this, the invoices are here. This is called the pending approval queue. So if you don't have any invoices that have been approved by your manager and now need to be approved by you, you won't see anything listed here. I'll go over in a lot more detail of all these different fields, but just so you know, this is a little section here. This disputed invoice area, you won't really have a view of that. This is primarily something that the managers see. They dispute invoices in order to just kind of get them out of their way. So if they have a whole bunch of invoices to approve, they have this option to dispute an invoice and just kind of move it down to a different area. If it's an invoice that they need to just pay at a later time or perhaps do some research on before they feel comfortable approving it. So don't expect to see disputed invoices on your screen. You'll just see pending approval if you do have invoices. And then more before of this home tab, this home screen that you'll see, in this upper left-hand corner, you'll see the section quick search. This is one way. If you have an invoice number that you'd like to search, you can search it here. You can also search through a variety of options during this invoice search at the bottom here. So this is where you can view any invoice from the launch of you guys using Avid, which I believe was early December. You'll be able to search all invoice history here. Now you'll have all of your accounting history. That's still all in your accounting software, GenArc. But this, you'll only be able to pull invoices from the Avid Exchange launch just because it was so much data prior, you know, all those hard copy invoices that are just kind of starting fresh with the electronic version from the December launch. But you can see the invoice search options here are pretty handy. So if you have the invoice number, if you know the specific vendor, you can search by that. You can search just by your community as well. So you will see a list of all the different communities that are managed by FirstService. However, you'll only have access to your community, just like every other board member will only have access to theirs. So there, you can, you know, there's that security there. You do also have the option if you just want to search by invoice date and end date for your community. You can do by due date there, invoice amount, end amount, these enterprise code groups. It always reminds me of Star Trek, but it's not Star Trek. I can talk Star Trek Enterprise. There we go. These enterprise code groups actually just refer to GL entity codes or the code that the general ledger department uses for your community. So it'll just be kind of a shortened kind of abbreviation for your community. So you can use those fields there if you do, but I recommend just search by community. One of the easiest ways to search for invoices as well is to just use invoice status. You can search by all, you can do disputed, approved, pending approval. So this will be a big one if you're wondering where an invoice is. Maybe your manager is doing some research on a particular invoice and you haven't seen it yet. You can do pending approval and see everything that's in your manager's queue if needed. Or if you have want to search a particular invoice number, you can do that as well. You'll also see things like purchase order and type. We don't use those, so you don't need to search or use these fields here. In the batch status, this is actually just if an invoice has been exported from this program to our accounting software. So the accounting software is the be-all, end-all of where you're going to see the final, check and payment being cut or dependent on which type of payment the vendor has chosen. But if something has been batched in from Avid, that means that it's sent off to the accounting software. If it's unbatched, that means that it's still in the system. But generally, you can just search by invoice status, and you'll be good to go. If it says approved, that means that it's on its way for payment, if it hasn't already been paid. So that's just a tour of the invoice search and the quick search option up here. There's this little message center here, and you'll see this hyperlink where it says Invoice Administrator. This link doesn't really work, so you just want to make sure that you reach out to your particular contact if you do have any questions or concerns with Avid. So I know we have Mary Beth and Oscar Arenas and Jody McDermott, and I believe all their contact information was sent to you in your communication about this training. So you have that option to contact them. And then something else that's also available within Avid itself is this community center link. So this is the same link as this community access here. What these links are, it's a link to a separate little site here. Oops, where's that one? Generally it works, I promise. Here we go. So the community center, and this is just a site where it has additional videos, wiki articles, blogs, different stuff about the system itself. But generally, I recommend just referring to that Board of Directors user guide that was sent to you because that's very narrowed down for our market, so for California. All the different regions of First Service use Avid Exchange, so this kind of encompasses all of their use of it as well. But you do have this option here, just so you know. So my community. And then before I get into the depths of these invoices and these fields, I wanted to show you just a bit more of the site itself. So if we go to My Profile, this is where you can come and you can change your password. So after you initially log in for the first time, you're going to be prompted to change your password to whatever you like. But in the future, if you wanted to come in and change your password, what you can do is just come to My Profile, change your password here. You'll see this is your email. This email address is generally going to be your username. So I have mine here. We also have your first name and last name. And something that is nice about Avid is that if you're ever wondering, like, well, do I have to go in every day and see if I have invoices there to approve? It's kind of a hassle. What's nice is that you'll actually receive one summary email every single day with all the invoices that are in your queue, and they'll be delivered to the email that is in your profile. So if you have 5 invoices in your queue, you'll get a list of that in an email just saying, hey, these are the 5 invoices in your queue. If you want to log in and check and approve them. If you did want to receive more than one notification a day, this is also where you come and update that. So you can see approval notification subscription. Everybody's account is generally set up to just receive that one default notification, so you're welcome to change it to more if you would like. If you don't have any invoices in your queue, you simply won't receive a notification email, so it won't notify you saying, hey, you don't have any, you just don't get an email. If you scroll down a bit more, you'll see the section for roles, and that just means the part that your account is set for in the system. So yours will generally read board member approver here. And at the very bottom, this associated communities, this will just show that your account is linked to your association. So then the system knows to route invoices to you from your manager. So your manager is linked in the same way, and that's why they receive the invoices from that Avid team to their queue. So this is pretty basic, so just My Profile. And this last tab here, you can just disregard this. This is just an administrative tab, so you will only see this Home and My Profile. Here we go. So before I move on to getting more into the meat of the invoices, I'm going to check the question and answer little chat here as well. Let's see. So we just have a question from Maggie. So what if 2 signatures are required? So if 2 signatures are required, what can be done with Avid is you can have one board member approve it after the manager, and then after that board member approves it, the invoice will be routed to the other board member for approval. But generally that approver, the community manager signature is one signature, and then the board member's of approval is the second signature. So that's generally how it is. You can have it where two board members officially approve the invoice, so that's just dependent, and you could speak with your manager about what you'd like to do for your community, and they can have that set up that way. And then for Maggie as well, if you don't have a PC, we'll have to figure something out for you because Internet Explorer, like I was saying, unfortunately, is the only web browser that can be used to access Avid Exchange. So we'll work with Mary Beth and see what we can work out for you. So I'm writing that down to you. All right, and then we do have so let's see. Okay, and then so what if your payment is coming out of your reserves account? So there are different kind of processes for reserve coding as well that the managers are aware of. So if it is something that, like all the invoices that you receive as board members, they'll already be coded. So your manager will have already gone through a process of getting that specific code on the invoice for you already. And then later on, I'll show you an area where you're going to be able to check within each invoice if the manager has a specific comment or note for you. So if they can let you know, hey Elizabeth, this was the invoice that we're pulling and paying with our reserves account. So just a heads up. So yeah, there's definitely great communication in here, and your managers will know how to process and code with reserve coding. Excellent. Okay, great questions, everybody. Thank you. And then let's see. And then oh, okay, and then Mary Beth just confirmed, so they'll be taking care of reserve expenditures by paying out of the reserve account, and then to the board members would sign or repay operating. Like I was saying, so that all that process is worked out, but that's the way that it officially is handled. All right. Great, well thank you everybody. So next up, we're going to go into to how do you actually open up the invoice, what are all these different fields and what do they mean. So when you come into your queue, if you have those notifications that you did receive an invoice in your queue and you need to pay it, you come in and you're going to see this pending approval queue. So all these fields here, there's information about the invoice that the Avid team has entered, which your manager has verified are correct. So you can come here, the invoice number, this field here, if you click on the hyperlink, that's how you're going to view the invoice itself in one way, and all of this information. I'm going to go into a lot more of this in a moment, but I wanted you guys to get an idea of what we're going to see. You can see all this information here. We're going to see the actual invoice image. And this is a test invoice. It's normally all invoices look just like this, where you're going to see a very large image of the invoice just right there for you. You'll also be able to see coding. This little sneak preview there. But back on our home screen, there are little quick ways to view the invoice if you would like. So I'm just going to click home and I'm going to go back to my summary screen. So here, this is this little box with the arrow coming out. This is one way that you can view the information. You cannot process an invoice from here, but if you like the view of this layout, you're definitely welcome to look at the invoice like this, verify the information here. You can see how the manager coded the invoice. So that's one way. If you just want to see the GL coding or reserve coding that your manager has completed for that invoice, you can just click this magnifying glass and hover over it, and then you can see that the coding and the description for the coding comes up, because they're going to be typing the descriptions and doing all the coding before it gets to you. It also relays how much was allocated to that GL code, and they do have to allocate the full amount. So you can see that this one's a test one is a little different, but you can see how that's laid out there. And this last image, so maybe it's just easier for you to have a whole screen dedicated to that invoice. So you'll have this here, and you can see it opened up in a separate web browser. So I can still go back, invoice search, but if I just wanted to take a quick look at the invoice just on my own real quick that way, I can do that as well. So this is one way if you ever need to print them, if you wanted it for your reference or save it to a special file or anything like that, you can do it there. And then you can also click invoice number, all these headers are hyperlinked. So if you do end up accumulating a few in your queue, you can sort these and it'll change by ascending or descending order by that field when you click it. In this field right next to invoice number, we have vendor ID, so that's just the coding that we use for vendors. Here you'll see the vendor name, the vendor field for their name, their remit address, so for where their payment's going to be sent, it's going to be listed here. It's primarily for the manager to verify it's being sent to the correct office, since some vendors have multiple offices, throughout California or the country. Have the invoice date, the amount of the invoice. We don't use order by. It's of your community listed here, so you're just going to see your community name, and in parentheses, it's going to list the general ledger coding or the GL entity coding. So this is just our sample, so it says test, but if you were maybe the Casablanca community, it might say CAVA in parentheses. So just a heads up on that one. And we also have this action field, and so this is just listing what step of the invoice it's in. So this is just a standard one. Usually it will say once it's in your queue, it's going to say board member approval. So just a heads up on what the action step is. And this on behalf of, this is a field that's used, you'll only see a name or anything listed here if your manager needed backup, if they're on leave or on vacation, a proxy approver, so just another manager can code the invoices and do all that before they're sent to you. So if your manager's going to Hawaii for a month, you don't need to worry about invoices just sitting in their queue. Someone else on the management side will be taking care of them. So essentially, it's just a neat feature that we have for backup, and you don't really need to see any fields or any data entered in this field here. So that's just there. I just wanted you to be aware why it's probably going to be empty most of the time. So that's all of this. So if you recall, how do I get into the invoice to actually approve it or route it back to my manager? I'm just going to come over here and click the hyperlink. But before I go into more detail, did anybody have any questions regarding that summary screen or any of those different fields? And I'll check our question answer here too. And so we had a question, does the system replace the process of you sending us the check for signature? And yes, that is correct. So this system is replacing your physical signature on a check. What this is doing, your approval for the invoices, essentially your electronic signature. So that's an excellent question. So yes, this is your electronic signature on the invoice. All right, so now here we are in the area where we have the ability to take action on this invoice. So I'm going to go over the different fields, and I'm going to go over a couple different scenarios. So one is if you're comfortable approving the invoice, how to just approve it or to include a comment with it. And then I'll go over a scenario of, well, what if I'm not comfortable approving the invoice or have questions about it and I need something adjusted before I feel comfortable approving it. So we'll do that after I give you a little tour of this side of the site. So I opened up the invoice to approve, and so what I see here is always going to be the default. This is the header, and all this information is what we saw on that previous screen essentially, and this is reflecting the data that is on this invoice. So you can see here the invoice number. This is a test one, but it would be reflected here. This is stuff your manager is verifying. You can scroll down and confirm the invoice amount is correct, that the invoice date is also correct on the invoice. You can scroll down. And anything, if you have a work order or anything that is attached to the invoice, it's going to need to be included on this this one invoice image, because anything that is in this little section here is going to be exported to the accounting software, so we always have it for record. So this is what vendors are directed to do as well, saying any documentation we need for one invoice needs to be included in one PDF. So just a heads up for you to scroll all the way down just to check that there. If you did want to take that full view of the invoice like I showed on the previous screen, but you don't want to go back, you actually still have that option here. So I can click that little square next to the invoice number, and there's that full page invoice image for me once again. So it's pretty nice to have the option to go back and forth, and you can see it created a whole new web browser for me, or web page. So I don't have to worry about being, taken out of this and having to go back. But I'm going to get rid of these guys. There we go. And then going down here, so if you see the due date and the date, there's invoice posting date. Sometimes that's different, so your managers might be receiving invoices from a certain vendor way in advance, where they don't need to be paid yet, but they're just getting their invoices in to be taken care of. What your manager can do is actually change the date here. So if this was submitted for, a President's Day event, or maybe even something for Easter, they're just way ahead of the game. And I didn't want this to come out of my budget yet, I can actually just change the invoice posting date to be closer to the date where I want the check cut. So actually it'll be the date, if I want this to be, later in February, I can change that here. And then when that date comes, that's when it's going to leave Avid and then go to the accounting software for payment, because it's all dependent on this invoice posting date. Most of the time, it'll just be the normal invoice due date or date there, the date that the manager processed it. But I just wanted to give you a heads up if you wanted to view that and see if maybe it should be paid later, or if you had any questions, that's what it's about there. And you will see these different fields as well. So we have memo, separate check, original PO, purchase order, and all these. These are intentionally left blank. So a heads up on that. And once again, there's our vendor ID, our customer account number. This customer account number is actually assigned by our vendor. So if you don't have one, don't be alarmed. It's just something assigned by vendors per community. But if you do have one assigned, a neat feature of Avid as well is that you can click on this magnifying glass, and it will pull up all the related invoices for your community and that vendor. So if a particular vendor is very prominent in your community, maybe for landscaping or plumbing, you can click on this magnifying glass and you can see all of the invoices back from the December launch in the system here. And you can actually click on the hyperlink and it'll bring you to the same sort of screen for that. So if you wanted to compare and contrast another invoice, you can definitely do that. So it's a nice feature. Just keep that in mind that not all of them do have customer account numbers. But if you do, you have that option to do that. So that's our header screen there. Remember, I'm just verifying with this invoice image tab. But if you're wondering, well, where's the GL coding for me to verify? Because I want to make sure that the description's correct, that it looks like the correct GL. So what I want to do is just go to this tab right underneath header. It's distributions. They kind of blend together a little bit, so just keep in mind that those are separate. So we have distributions here. You'll see you won't be able to edit any of these fields. So if this is something you want to change, I'm going to be showing you, like I said, how to route this back to my manager if I'm not comfortable with it. But I can verify. So okay, the entity code looks correct. That GL code, I can hover over it. Okay, contract landscape service, what the description exactly is for that invoice. And then normally, you'll have that entire invoice amount allocated to at least one GL code. But in this case, it was just our sample one. So we have this the invoice amount for this GL code. This percentage field is just the percentage for the invoice amount itself. So your managers can type in, if they're very math oriented, they can type in 35.56, and the system will pull up this, and vice versa. They can put in the amount, and the system's going to calculate the percentage field. So it's just little options for them. Makes it a little more fun. There we go. So that's our header and our distribution field. And before I move on to just the different information down here and how to approve and everything, did anyone have any questions on any fields in the header or distribution tab? I'll give you a moment. I'll open up our chat section. I think we might be good. Okay, and then don't worry too that if it might be hard to type real fast, so I'll come back and definitely we'll be checking that here. Okay, so we do have one. So how far does the history go back? So within Avid, the invoice history is going to go back to December 2015, so from the launch of Avid, because all the invoice history and all of your accounting history is still intact in your accounting software, just your ability to research invoices are going to go back just to December? Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So if you're, trying to search for stuff from years and years ago, the accounting software is going to be the place to refer to. All right. So we have these. I see my invoice image here, and I'm comfortable approving the invoice because I think that everything, the invoice amount looks correct, everything with the invoice looks correct. I agree with the GL coding and how it was completed. So all I need to do, if I just want to approve it, I can either click just approve, and then it's gone from my queue. I don't have to touch it again or do anything with it. Or I could do approve and comment. So this is if I just want to have a special comment stored in the history of this invoice. So if I ever want to go research it again, or maybe there was, a lot to go about with this invoice, if I wanted to check that, I can just do approve and comment. I could just type a comment in here. If I wanted to send an email to my manager, kind of, if they were waiting for me to maybe approve a certain invoice, I can type in their email address here. But generally, if you just want a comment stored in the system, you can just type it here, click submit, and then the invoice is processed and you've stored a comment with it. So if you're wondering, well, where's the comment even stored? It's just stored here in the history of the invoice. So this is a neat little spot too. So we have invoice at the tab, the image, and you can also see the entire history. So any step that is completed with this invoice, I can view it all in this history tab here. So if I have a comment that I just want stored for posterity's sake in here, I could add it in here. Any comments, so if I end up, which I'm going to show you guys how to route invoice back to a manager, and I want to explain exactly why I'm doing that. If I need something changed on the invoice, this is where the manager is going to come and look to see if I've said anything. And I also recommend that you all come here and check the history tab too for invoice, correspondence from your manager. So instead of having to do everything, separate through email or over the phone for a particular invoice, maybe you have lots, concerning a certain vendor, you can just come here and click the history, and your manager could have typed something, or you can type something as well, and it's stored here. So just history is a great way where you could see even when the invoice was uploaded into the system, who created it. So generally it's going to be a Bizarro email address from the Avid team. But then you'll see when your manager approved it, if there's any different things done with the invoice. So if they needed to route it to accounting or do special things with it, it'll all be listed here. And the section can't be edited or deleted, so everything in here is going to be stored with the invoice just forever. So it's a great historical record for not only you, but for the managers as well. Remember, history tab is your friend to check for correspondence. So we do have the invoice image here. So what if there is an invoice? So I just went through and I approved an invoice. So just very simply, I confirmed the information was correct. I checked my history tab to see if there was anything from the manager. Okay, everything looks good. Remember, I just either approve or approve and comment. But what if there was something that I didn't quite think was correct? From the invoice number, maybe that doesn't align in the header, or maybe the distribution was a little off from what my manager and I discussed. Naturally, you're probably all looking at this dispute button up here, and I would too, but it is incorrect. So you want to just kind of even pretend like this dispute button is not there. Because if you click this, what happens is it only moves the invoice to the center of your screen, in your home screen. So if I dispute that, this is what the managers use to kind of get a certain invoice out of their, daily invoices they're processing. So we'll pretend I clicked dispute. I'll show you where it goes. It goes into that disputed invoice section that I was talking about before. So you can see it wasn't routed to anybody. So if I was disputing it because I had a question or anything like that, I couldn't route this to my manager to adjust anything on it because all it is just sitting in the center of my screen. So I'm not able to do anything. The only thing from this point is for me to either approve it. So I have disputed invoices. I'm like, oh dang, okay, well now I can approve and comment and approve. I can't dispute anymore because it's not there. You guys won't even see the void button, so it's just good to pretend like that the button is not there. I wish that was just the way you could route it to your manager, but it's just a couple more steps than that. Remember, no dispute, just pretend it's not there. So, but like I was saying, I come in, I'm like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't think that GL distribution description is correct. So I'd like to route this back to my manager, give them a heads up as to why I'm not comfortable approving at the moment. So what you're going to want to do is just go to this one tab called Workflow. So I'm here, so I see all the stuff here. It's the workflow of the invoice, this kind of step where the system's automatically going to take an invoice. But the button I want to select is this Assign Ad Hoc Approver. So it's kind of weird verbiage. So I generally just refer to assigning an ad hoc approver as routing it to your manager. So just think of this as assigning to my manager. So assign ad hoc, you'll see that in the user guide as well. Ad hoc just equals routing. One key thing with ad hoc that is just kind of different than the routing is that once your manager takes care of whatever needs to be done with the invoice, it will be routed back to your queue. So it's kind of like a boomerang. I'm routing it out, I'm sending it via ad hoc, but once the adjustments are made, it's going to be back in my queue because your manager wants to make sure that you agree with the final adjustment. So, so that's what this little button is here. So I do workflow, assign ad hoc approver, and then it's just going to bring me to the separate screen. It looks kind of similar to writing the comments in. So you can see this drop down here. So this is one of the drop downs that does not show up if you're using a different web browser. So that's why it's very important that you are using Internet Explorer as your web browser. Otherwise, you won't be able to send anything back to your manager if you have any questions or you don't want to approve an invoice. So make sure you're using that. This drop down should always be there. So what I do to get this going is just click this little drop down here. You can see there's going to be a lot of names listed in here, but fortunately, once you click this arrow, you can just start typing your manager's name. So I'm just going to start typing my name in. I'm going to pretend that I'm the manager here. So we go, all right, so I just typed in my manager's name, and then it came up in the list, and you can see that there were a lot of Jennifers there, and perhaps your manager also has a similar, more common name, so you can just make sure that you select the right person. So I verify that there. And this is where it's really important that you type why you want to return the invoice or ad hoc that invoice back to the manager. Because then they're going to be checking their history tabs. They're going to see, oh, how come Mary sent it back to me? I want to make sure I understand, so I correct this or do the research that they want me to do on it. So I'm going to write to my manager, please revise or help clarify the DL description. Weren't the services performed? Maybe it was even written in the GL description as the wrong address. We'll say it was on 7 Honeybee Lane. Not 6 Honeybee. And then thank you. All right, and you don't need to sign your name or anything because if you notice in that history tab, your email address is stored as the person who performs the act. So if you created a comment, same thing with your manager, it's going to be stored in there. So you don't even need to sign your name. You can if you'd like, but you don't have to. Favorite comment, you have 1,000 characters max. We have this here. Okay, I selected my manager, put in the reason why I want to route the invoice back, and then I just click assign. And then it's out of my queue, and it's routed to the manager. And actually, you are brought back to it. I forgot, there is one little thing with the system. You're going to be brought back to the invoice right after you click that ad hoc button. But if I click home, then my screen is refreshed. You can also just click the refresh screen here, and then you can see that it's gone. So it's routed off to my manager for handling, and then, maybe the next day or next couple days, I'll see it back in my queue. I can open up the invoice. We'll pretend this is the one I just routed away. So I come in, and maybe even before I check everything, since this is one especially that I routed out, I just want to come to the history tab. And then I would come here. I would see if my manager, what they said about the invoice, because if you're asking them to correct some things, they'll note it here. They can say, oh yes, the GL description was also for, that street, or good catch, it was actually on 7 Honeybee Lane that they performed the services, not 6 Honeybee Lane, which I wrote in the GL description. So you can see all that here, and then after that, if you're comfortable approving it, you can actually come in and do approve and comment, or approve, because now it's back in your queue and you're good to go with it. So that's what you want to do, either approve or route back to your manager. So I went to the history and that's where I checked it. So hopefully that makes sense of either just approving it or routing to manager. And then you can review everything again if you would like. But those are essentially the 2 steps that you'll be taking as board members to, to process these invoices. And then before I go on to review just these extra tabs so you guys know what they are and these different little features, were there any questions on that process, on either one, or any different things that come to mind? Okay, and then we see, all right, and then so we have another question too. So will check images or copies of the payments be available for the approved of the invoices? So copies of the payments, so Mary Beth, those would all be in the accounting software, correct? And then Mary Beth will be answering on here as well. And then Burton, it also depends so how soon after the approval of the invoice will the vendor be paid. So there are different options for vendor payment through Avid Pay. So they can either have a check cut for them, which is probably some of the longest process. But I believe that's within a few days. So probably within the week they should have a check, because after the check is cut, then there's mailing time as well. Vendors also have the option to do a certain credit card type payment, which is almost instant. I think it's even the next day. So there are different options. So it just depends what the vendor has selected. And then so we have, okay, so Mary Beth answered. So no, there are no check images. If there was a check, it would be in Avid, and the recordation of all of it will be in GenArc. So yeah, so you'll have everything in, GenArc will be the be-all, end-all. So you can see, check images and all that, or I'm sorry, the invoice images and all the payment verification in GenArc itself. It's a great question. So Avid is just going to be that platform where you're going to approve the invoice, it's going to export, and then the payment process will begin. Okay, great. So if that all makes sense, remember, if I don't want to approve an invoice, which tab do I go to? Workflow. So we have workflow here, so it's kind of different. Workflow, because I'm going to change it, route it to my manager through assign ad hoc approver. Find their name in here. I can start typing. I just like to prompt it with doing the drop down, and then I start typing the name. And then it's going to come up here, and I'll select it, write my reasoning down, and then assign it, and that makes that invoice go to my manager. So either these two, workflow, and this. So that's how you assign or ad hoc. And I do see we have another question here. Great. Oh yeah. So definitely. So once so I'm going to show you guys these different fields. But once you get in there and start using the system, you definitely have a lot of support. But I think that you'll find it's a really nice way just to go in and look around and view the actual invoice image itself at any time. Maybe if you're a night owl and you want to, watch some Conan O'Brien while you approve invoices, you can definitely do that at home. An excellent, it's a really nice way. It's a streamlined process. But before we wrap up, like I said, I just wanted to go over these other tabs here just so you know what they're for. So primarily we're going to focus on the image tab, that workflow for routing it back, or the history tab, where we want to view things correspondence from our managers. But this little vendor tab right next to it here, this is just additional information of the remit address for that vendor, making sure that it's the correct office, that the payment is going to be delivered to, check. Line items, we don't really use this field here in the California market, but you can just generally just see the invoice total here. And then we have our workflow and history we went over. There's log comments. So if you just wanted to make a general comment about the invoice, you could definitely just do that here. But to avoid confusion and so many different spots where you can do comments, I'd either just do that workflow and routing comment or approve and comment. But you're welcome to use this too if you'd like. Everything you do will be stored in history, so it's there. But just so you know, that's what the log comment tab is for. We also have attachments. There'd be attachments here. Generally, you won't see too many things here. If you do, it might be something relating to vendors or anything like that. Maybe their W-9 or different things that had to have been routed to different departments. But generally, any invoice image is going to be included here. And you'll see a little number up here too if there is anything. And then so we have this tab here, and I see we did have a couple of questions come through, so let's take a look at those. So let's see, so who provides your user ID and your password to get started? So that should be coming, to my understanding, from, I believe Mary Beth will be sending those out, or somebody from her team. So you guys should be receiving those very soon. And upon your first login, you'll be prompted to change your password. So whatever the default password is that they do end up sending you, it'll prompt you to change it right away. So you'll be getting those very soon via email. And then we did have another question too. So will the invoices from First Service show up here as a vendor? So they should, yeah. Any invoice at all will be, they will be in Avid. And if you have it with your manager, where they're going to be sending every single invoice to you for processing, you should be seeing those as well. Or actually, First Service ones, you're right. I don't believe that the First Service invoices do come through here because that's more of corporate accounting, and this is our client accounting site. We do have utility bills that do come through here now, where you can search and view them. They aren't paid through the site, but they are, you are able to access them. So yeah, heads up on that one. So First Service invoices, Mary Beth, is that correct that the First Service invoices will just be done through corporate accounting or through a different department there? And then while she's typing the answer to that one, okay, so the email did go out yesterday with the usernames and passwords. So I think you guys can see this part of the screen too, but if you did not receive your username and password, please send Mary Beth an email at marybeth.scott@fsresidential.com, and she'll resend your username and password for you. Same thing if you need a copy of that Avid Board of Directors user guide, she can also resend that to you as well. Okay, great.
Hi.
All right, so okay, so yeah, for now, so they're not, so actually you guys are not yet putting utility
Can't hear you.
so that is going to be further down the line. And the same thing for First Service invoices, so that's just done through corporate accounting. So you won't see those through Avid as well. So only client accounting invoices are going to be shown through Avid. Yeah, so you can get those. At a later time, so yeah, and I'm sure that will be announced at a later date when those will be uploaded to the system. But for now, don't expect to see those in there, and that would be entirely correct. And then once again, if you guys didn't get the Board of Directors user guide, you can send that just to send the request to marybeth.scott@fsresidential.com, and she can send that over to you. And then just our last little bit here, before we wrap everything up. We do have these just extra tabs up here, so I just want to show you guys the Home tab, brings you back to that home screen. We recommend that you use this instead of the back browser, because then sometimes when you do that, you have to refresh your screen to just get the correct data again. So just use that handy Home button. And perhaps you have several invoices in your queue and you weren't ready to delve into a really deep one yet. You can skip the invoices, and it'll actually bring you to the next one that's in your list of invoices. So I didn't have any more, so it just brought me back to my main screen. But if I had several in there, I could just keep skipping. It's kind of nice. And then save is generally just used by our managers after they do GL coding. We always have them save all their work. Just for prosperity, want to make sure that it's in there and saved correctly after they put all that work in. And we've gone over our approve and comment and approve. And then dispute, no, we just want to pretend that is not there. You guys will not see void. And then this one last thing here is print, along with help. There's our community access screen. It brings us to that access where we can view wikis and blogs and articles. And then here's print. Hopefully it comes up on my screen here. All right. So you guys also do have this option. It doesn't have the invoice image here, so you can print that separate if you'd like or save it. But this is a very quick plan of viewing all the information on all these different tabs and screens and the history. You can view all this just by looking at the print button too. So you can see everything that we've gone over is essentially shown on the screen. So just another way to easily access the different invoices in Avid here. So I'm going to go back to our home screen. Yep, and then here's a nice clean screen here. But before I wrap up, I just wanted to make sure, did you guys have any questions at all about, searching for invoices or approving them or routing them back to manager? And we'll check here just to make sure everything's good. Okay, great. And yeah, just make sure, review that user guide if you have any questions, reach out to your great team. We'll also, I believe that I'm going to have this recording as well, so if you want to have the fun of listening to it all again, you definitely can. So I'll send that link over to Mary Beth once this recording saves, so you guys can watch this if you'd like to again. And I really hope that you guys enjoy this program. I think that you really will, and your managers have been working really hard on learning and mastering this, so I think it's going to be great. And yes, thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful evening. I appreciate it.